The criminal justice system is a set of agencies and processes established by the government to control crime and impose penalties on those who deserve punishment from violating laws. The sole purpose of the criminal justice system is to deliver a civil process for the American people. There are different types of systems, depending on city, county, state, federal, or tribal government or military installation. Throughout the system, processes are invoked to ensure the rights of the accused and convicted are respected. A cornerstone of the legal system is that all are innocent until proven guilty. It is up to the prosecution to prove otherwise. The main systems are state and federal. State criminal justice systems handle crimes that are committed within their state boundaries, and the federal system handles crimes that are committed on federal property or multiple states. The main components of the justice system include law enforcement, adjudication, and corrections. Prosecution is the carrying of a legal proceeding against a person. This process is when a prosecutor and a defendant exchange information and material about a case. A common issue in the justice system is that many people are prosecuted and sentenced to death for misconduct. In 2003, there is a 4.1% error rate among people who are sentenced to death. Innocent lives can be taken by this misconduct and incorrect sources of error. Since 1977, 1,320 defendants executed were actually found innocent after their death sentence. This is where the justice system needs to improve through upcoming years. The prosecution process has other flaws, such as a common seen bias in the courtroom. Oftentimes, personal aspects of a person can have effect in trial. A person might instantly make assumptions on someone's race or sexual orientation. It is important that prosecutors try to ignore these and only base information from facts.
So when I get a police report complaint request, which is the initial point where we have to evaluate the police report and see if we're going to be filing charges, I absolutely ignore the portion that has to do with race or gender or age or whatever. I go straight to the facts because really it's irrelevant. So I evaluate the facts, I read the facts, and then based on the facts, I decide what kind of charges to file. Now, sometimes we have to consider what the race is or what the age is. For example, if it's a case that involves an identification of a witness and a witness states that they saw a Hispanic male adult in their 20s, we have to compare that with the actual descriptors of the suspect. And so that's when we do look at that. But overall, I purposely completely avoid looking at the descriptors and just look at the facts in order to make a decision purely on the evidence and the facts as described by the witnesses and whatever the violation may be, as opposed to any bias, whether it's racial or gender or ethnic or whatever, playing into my decision making.
And that I wanted to be someone who would be a part of that system, someone who would stand up for those who didn't really have a fourth grade. A lawyer came in and they talked about what they did, and from that moment on, I just always wanted to be a lawyer. I thought that a lawyer was someone who helped people, someone who stood up for those who didn't have a voice, and so I can't think of anything else that I ever wanted to do other than be a lawyer. And the way that I became a judge, I never thought about being a judge. One day a judge pulled me aside. His name was Judge Kurt Cumley. And he pulled me aside and he said, I think that you should consider being a judge. This is after about 10 years of being a lawyer. And I thought, wow, I'd never considered it. And so I thought about it, and other judges talked to me about it, and I decided to give it a shot, and I was appointed by the governor to be a judge about 5 years ago.
In my current assignment, I think the toughest job is seeing the victims of sexual assault crimes having to testify about unspeakable violations against them.
Rape is a type of sexual assault usually involving sexual intercourse or other forms of sexual penetration carried out against a person without that person's consent. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lives. In 8 out of 10 cases of rape, the victim knew the person who sexually assaulted them. In campus settings, more than 90% of sexual assault victims on college campuses do not report the assaults. Overall, rape is the most underreported crime. 63% of sexual assaults are not reported to the police. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand the rights I have just read to you? With these rights, do you wish to speak to me? The Miranda rights.
Court-appointed attorneys versus paid attorneys, what a great question. I was a court-appointed attorney or a public defender for 15 years. And I got into that work, like I said, because I wanted to help people. So my opinion may be somewhat biased. I think there are excellent paid attorneys out there. But I also believe that when you're court-appointed, you've selected this work because you love it, because you want to fight for the people that you're representing. And also, public defenders are in court every day, all day. They know the lawyers, they know the district attorneys, they know the judges, they know all of the players. I know that as a public defender, often paid attorneys would come into court and ask me advice and ask me if they were making a good deal, and I thought, you're getting paid, why are you asking me? So I think they're good and bad in every bunch, but absolutely a public defender is someone who has great experience.
Serial killer. Noun. A person who commits a series of murders, often with no apparent motive and typically following a characteristic, predictable behavior pattern. The relationship between psychopath and serial killer is practically interesting. Not all serial killers are psychopaths, and not all psychopaths are serial killers.
You think I would still be here if I was guilty of anything? And look me in the eye. Look me straight away in the eye. Do I look like I'm guilty about anything?
You look more guilty than anyone I ever looked in the eye in my life.
Really?
Is one born a serial killer, or does the tendency to kill develop from birth to adulthood? Studies show neglect and child abuse contribute to early coping mechanisms consisting of violent behavioral patterns. The willingness to kill is a biological, social, and psychological problem that infests itself in a serial killer's mind. Serial killers' motives and reasons to kill all differ from person to person. Although there is no universal template for the formation of a serial killer, many use their unique abilities to manipulate and ultimately kill their victims.
He related this was a person he really liked. He indicated that he had filleted his heart and kept it in the freezer, and he also kept his bicep. He indicated that he had eaten the thigh muscle of this subject, but it was so tough he could hardly chew it.
It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me.
Officers and their power. There's been a lot of things in the news, and I would say, number one, like any profession, lawyers, judges, law enforcement, there's going to be good and there's going to be bad, and the bad ones we have to deal with. I think that
And the police just, he's
cell phone
covered.
video has
They
exposed a
killed my
lot of the
boyfriend.
problems that we have with bad officers out there.
Here is a
So I think
timeline
it's-
of
I
unarmed
think it's
black
an
people
important
killed by
issue,
police over the past
and I
year.
think that we're going to have to deal with it more
Denontre
and more.
Hamilton,
The more we see it, the more we're going to have
Eric
to deal with it.
Garner,
But I think there's good and bad in
John
every profession,
Crawford
and
III,
definitely in law enforcement as well.
Michael Brown Jr., Ezell Ford, Dante Parker, Tanisha Anderson, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Rumain Brisbane, Jermaine Reed, Tony Robinson, Philip White, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray. All of these deaths have sparked protests in cities across the nations. BLM, or Black Lives Matter, is an international activist movement. It has been organized to act against violence and unjust racism towards Black people. The movement began in 2013 after the acquittal of George Zimmerman and the shooting death of American teen Trayvon Martin.